If you had told me a year ago that my home, my fully paid off, legally owned, sweat and blood invested home, could be taken over a single penny, I'd have laughed you out of the room. And yet here we are on the battlefield of bureaucratic nonsense, with me facing off against an HOA run by the unholy trinity of greed, incompetence, and sheer pettiness. Let's rewind. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Well, it used to be quiet, before the HOA got a new president, Eleanor Thimbleton. Yes, that is her real name, and yes, she sounds exactly like the kind of person who would enforce a rule about lawn gnome height restrictions. Eleanor is the kind of person who wears a pearl necklace indoors, thinks her clipboard grants her divine authority, and considers HOA meetings more sacred than church. I had never had an issue with the HOA before. I paid my dues on time, kept my lawn respectable, meaning my grass wasn't an eyesore but also not so perfect that Eleanor would think I was challenging her personal turf supremacy, and generally kept to myself. But then, about a month ago, I got a letter. Notice of delinquency, final warning. My heart actually skipped a beat when I saw it. Was this a scam? Had I missed a payment? I logged into my bank, checked my records, and confirmed every HOA payment was accounted for. Confused, I read further. Total amount due, $5,432.16. Wait, what? I scoured the breakdown of charges, and there in the fine print was the explanation. Initial underpayment of 1 cent on February 1st, last year. Late fees, administrative costs, penalty charges, and legal processing fees have accrued accordingly. A 1 cent underpayment. From a year ago. And somehow, these absolute lunatics had managed to turn that into over $5 grand in debt. My first reaction was laughter, actual out-loud laughter, because surely this was a mistake. But it was not a mistake. Rather than waste time calling Eleanor, who, let's be honest, was probably rubbing her hands together like a cartoon villain at the mere thought of seizing someone's home, I decided to handle it in person at the next HOA meeting. The meeting was held in the neighborhood clubhouse, which Eleanor treated like her personal war room. I walked in to see her seated at the head of the table, flanked by the HOA board members, a group of spineless yes-men who only existed to nod whenever Eleanor said something asinine. I waited patiently through 45 minutes of nonsense, new mailbox color restrictions, a debate on whether Halloween decorations should be HOA approved, and a particularly heated discussion about whether Steve from Lot 24's dog looked too much like a wolf, before Eleanor finally acknowledged me. "Oh, you," she said, adjusting her glasses in that way people do when they want to look condescending. "You have an outstanding debt with the HOA." I smiled. "Yeah, about that. It seems there's been a tiny error. My records show I've paid everything in full." Eleanor tisked at me. "You were 1 cent short last year. And per the rules, underpayments accrue penalties. After a year, it's escalated to foreclosure status." The room went silent. Even some of the other board members looked uncomfortable. I raised an eyebrow. "So let me get this straight. You're trying to take my house over a penny." "Rules are rules," she chirped, as if she hadn't just admitted to attempting legal highway robbery. "Oh, don't get me wrong, I love rules," I said, flashing a grin. "In fact, I spent the past few days brushing up on some very interesting legal ones." Eleanor's smirk twitched. "Excuse me." I pulled out a folder and placed it on the table, opening it for dramatic effect. "See, I did some digging, and it turns out that in our state, there's this little thing called unjust enrichment. It means if an entity, like say, an HOA, manipulates fees in a way that's grossly disproportionate, it's considered fraud." Eleanor's face darkened. "Not only that," I continued, "but I found out something really fascinating about how our HOA structures payments. See, you're the one who generates the official invoice amounts each month, right?" "Yes," Eleanor said slowly. I tapped the folder. "And you're the one who set my invoice 1 cent lower than it should have been last year." Silence. "Which means," I went on, "that the only reason this happened is because of a clerical error on your end. And yet, instead of fixing it, you decided to let it snowball into a $5,000 fine and a foreclosure attempt." Eleanor's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Now, I don't know everything about HOA law, I said, shrugging, but I'm guessing a judge might not love the fact that this whole thing was caused by an HOA-generated underbilling. The silence in the room was deafening. One of the board members, a guy named Tom, finally spoke up. Wait. Is that true? Eleanor shot him a look that could have curdled milk. This is not up for discussion. Oh, it's very up for discussion, I cut in. Because I'm not just going to fight this. I'm going to make sure every single person in this neighborhood knows what's happening. I'm going to file a formal complaint with the state's HOA regulatory board. And if you try to foreclose on me, I leaned in with a smile. I'll take you to court for fraudulent fines, unjust enrichment, and intentional misrepresentation. Should be fun. The board members exchanged nervous glances. Eleanor looked like she was seconds away from spontaneously combusting. This meeting is adjourned, she snapped, slamming her gavel down so hard I thought it might crack the table. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Because Eleanor had picked the wrong person to mess with. Eleanor adjourned the meeting, but that didn't mean I was letting her off the hook. Oh no. This was just the beginning. As the board members shuffled out, avoiding my gaze like I had just announced I had a highly contagious disease, Eleanor tried to make a hasty exit. I stepped in front of her, holding up my folder. Eleanor, I assume you'll be rescinding this nonsense immediately? I asked, voice dripping with faux politeness. She sniffed. This matter is closed. I tilted my head. No, see, I don't think it is. Because unless you officially reverse this fraudulent charge, I'm going to make sure this HOA experiences what we in the legal world like to call a reckoning. Eleanor gave me a thin-lipped smile. You can try. But our foreclosure process is perfectly legal. You have 30 days to pay the amount in full, or we proceed. And with that, she marched off. The next morning, I got to work. First, I made some calls. I started with a real estate attorney, because while I knew enough about the law to argue my case, I needed an expert in my corner. The lawyer, Sarah, took about 2 minutes to start laughing when I explained what was happening. This is such a blatant case of HOA fraud. I can't believe they were dumb enough to document it, she said. I'll take this on. And by the way, they definitely don't want to go to court over this. Then, I made a call to the state HOA regulatory board. They were very interested in my story. Apparently, Eleanor had been reported before for shady practices, but no one had ever taken it this far. Finally, I turned to the most powerful tool in any modern HOA war, public shaming. I drafted an email to every single homeowner in the neighborhood. Subject: the HOA is trying to steal my house over a penny. Hey neighbors. I wanted to share something truly ridiculous happening right now. The HOA is attempting to foreclose on my home over a supposed debt. What's the amount, you ask? 1 penny. Yes. A single cent from a year ago. Here's the kicker. The HOA itself generated the incorrect invoice that led to the underpayment. They made the mistake, let it sit for a year, tacked on thousands in penalties, and are now saying they'll take my home over it. If this sounds like a scam, that's because it is. And I'm taking action. I've hired a lawyer, I've contacted the state regulatory board, and I'm not backing down. But this isn't just about me, this is about all of us. If they can do this to me, what's stopping them from pulling something similar on you? If you've ever had suspicious HOA fees or fines, now's the time to speak up. I'd love to hear your stories. Let's put an end to this HOA madness. Best. Evan Reed. The response was immediate and glorious. Within hours, I had a flood of replies. Turns out, I wasn't the only one Eleanor had been messing with. There were dozens of neighbors who had received sketchy fines, bizarre penalties, and aggressive threats of foreclosure for laughably small reasons. One woman, Linda, had been fined $200 because her garden gnome violated the aesthetic integrity of the neighborhood. Another guy, Dave, had been charged $500 for excessive leaf accumulation in the fall. And my personal favorite, someone got a notice saying their porch light was too bright and had to be changed, at an HOA mandated cost of $300. By the next day, my inbox was overflowing, and my phone was buzzing nonstop. People wanted in. They wanted to fight back. And Eleanor? She was losing it. I got a formal letter from the HOA, demanding I cease and desist spreading misinformation. I framed it and put it on my fridge. Then 2 days later, I saw Eleanor outside, clipboard in hand, marching toward my house. Oh, this was gonna be fun. I stepped onto my porch, coffee in hand, and gave her my biggest, most insufferably smug grin. "Morning, Eleanor. Lovely day, isn't it?" She pursed her lips. "I'm here to inform you that your actions are in violation of HOA policy regarding defamation." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Which policy is that?" "The one about not spreading falsehoods about the HOA," she stammered. I sipped my coffee. "Eleanor, everything I've said is documented by the HOA itself. In fact, I'd be happy to send you a copy of your own foreclosure notice. Would you like it emailed, or printed out and framed like a work of absurdist art?" Her face turned an alarming shade of purple. "You will pay your debt or face the consequences," she snapped. "Oh, I'm facing consequences all right," I said cheerfully. "Just not the ones you were hoping for." With that, I turned around and walked back inside, letting the door click shut behind me. Eleanor wanted to play games? Fine. I was done playing defense. I was about to go nuclear. Step 1. The lawyer strikes. Sarah, my attorney, officially filed a fraud complaint with the state HOA Oversight Board. The key argument? That the HOA intentionally created an underbilling to manufacture a debt, then used the debt to justify insane penalties and a foreclosure attempt. Legally, this wasn't just unethical, it was borderline criminal. Step 2. Public pressure. With the neighborhood now fully aware of Eleanor's antics, a group of us organized a special HOA meeting. The best part? Enough homeowners were angry that we had the votes to force a recall vote on Eleanor and her board cronies. Step 3. Media attention. Oh, and I may or may not have tipped off a local investigative reporter about an interesting case of HOA abuse. Because if there's one thing HOA tyrants hate more than losing power, it's public scrutiny. Within a week, Eleanor's little power trip was about to come crashing down. And I was going to have front row seats. Eleanor had spent years ruling over this neighborhood like some kind of HOA overlord, but her reign of pettiness was about to crumble. The problem with power-hungry people like her? They always think they're untouchable, until someone flips the script. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to dismantle her little empire. After my email blast, the neighborhood was buzzing. People were furious. No one had ever challenged Eleanor before, because she had always operated under the radar, targeting people one by one so they felt isolated. But now? She had pissed off the entire community, and the floodgates had opened. The HOA next meeting was scheduled for the following Monday, but we weren't going to wait that long. Instead, we used an obscure HOA bylaw that allowed homeowners to call an emergency meeting if at least 25% of them signed a petition. In just 48 hours, we got over 60% of the neighborhood to sign. Eleanor didn't know it yet, but her days as queen of the clipboard were numbered. I knew Eleanor wasn't going to go down without a fight. Sure enough, the next morning, I woke up to find 2 violations taped to my door. Violation number 1. Your mailbox is 0.5 inches too tall per HOA standards. Immediate correction required. Violation number 2. A garden hose was observed on your lawn. Per Section 14, hoses must be stored out of view at all times. Fine, $150. Oh, this was adorable. I grabbed my phone and took high-resolution photos of both. Then, just for fun, I grabbed a tape measure and recorded a video proving that my mailbox was, in fact, perfectly within regulation. Then, I sent Eleanor an email. Subject: Retaliation won't save you. Dear Eleanor, I noticed your desperate attempt to issue retaliatory fines. Unfortunately, you seem to have made 2 critical errors. Firstly, my mailbox is not out of compliance, as proven by attached evidence. Secondly, your attempt to fine me for having a hose visible is not enforceable, as per HOA regulations. Fines require a warning first, which you failed to issue. I forwarded both violations to my attorney and the state HOA board as further evidence of malicious enforcement and abuse of power. Also, just a heads up, over 60% of the neighborhood has signed a petition for a special recall meeting. We'll be seeing you there. Best. Evan Reed. By the time Thursday rolled around, the tension in the air was palpable. The HOA clubhouse was packed. At least 100 homeowners had shown up, way more than usual. Normally, these meetings had maybe 15 people. But tonight? Tonight was different. Eleanor sat at the head of the table, flanked by her usual crew of yes-men board members, trying to maintain her usual smug expression. But I could see it. The tiny crack in her confidence. She knew what was coming. The meeting started as usual, with Eleanor droning on about community standards and preserving property values. Then I stood up. Before we continue, I said loudly, we need to address a major issue. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. You're not on the agenda. I held up the petition. Actually, per HOA bylaw section 8.2, if 25% of homeowners sign a petition, a special meeting can be called for an immediate vote of no confidence in board members. We have over 60%. So I'd like to make a motion, a vote to remove the current HOA board, effective immediately. Gasps rippled through the room. Eleanor's face drained of color. You can't just. Oh, but we can, I interrupted smoothly. And per HOA rules, a recall vote takes priority over all other business. So let's vote. Someone from the back shouted, second. Eleanor looked around the room realizing, for the first time in her tyrannical reign, she had lost control. We passed out ballots. Homeowners quickly scribbled their votes, dropping them into a box. 10 minutes later, Tom, the board member who had started questioning Eleanor before, stood up to read the results. He cleared his throat. With a vote of 82 to 17, the motion to remove the current HOA board has passed. The room erupted in cheers. Eleanor shot to her feet. This is illegal. I will challenge this in court. I smiled. Please do. You'll lose. Then, in a final poetic moment, Tom picked up Eleanor's beloved gavel, looked her dead in the eye, and slammed it down. This meeting is adjourned. Eleanor stormed out. She was done. But I wasn't finished yet. Because there was still the matter of my house and those bogus fines. And I had one last move to play. Eleanor was out. The HOA board had been flushed like a bad decision after Taco Bell. But my fight wasn't over yet. Because despite her humiliating downfall, the bogus foreclosure attempt on my house was still active. HOA. Paperwork doesn't just magically disappear because the president gets dethroned. And while Eleanor was gone, her mess was still there, like a stubborn stain on the neighborhood's collective consciousness. Lucky for me, I had a plan. First thing the next morning, I met with Sarah, my real estate attorney, and handed her a folder thicker than Eleanor's ego. It contained a full payment history proving I had paid my HOA dues on time. Screenshots showing the HOA generated underbilling mistake of 1 cent. The absurd $5,432.16 in fines and foreclosure documents. My email exchange with Eleanor, proving she knew about the mistake but proceeded anyway. And most importantly, evidence of similar fraudulent fines against other homeowners. Sarah grinned as she flipped through the pages. Oh, this is beautiful, she said. You realize you don't just have a defense, you have a counterattack. Go on, I said, sipping my coffee like a villain about to press the big red button. Sarah tapped the folder. This is textbook fraudulent foreclosure. If we take this to court, the HOA won't just have to drop the case, they could be forced to pay damages. How much are we talking? I asked. Sarah leaned back, smirking. If we prove malicious intent? Easily 5 figures. maybe even 6. I nearly choked on my coffee. Not only was I about to erase my fake debt, I might actually get the HOA to pay me. Game on. Sarah sent a formal cease and desist letter to the HOA new board, demanding an immediate reversal of all fraudulent fees, cancellation of the foreclosure attempt, and an official apology. She also attached a draft lawsuit for wrongful foreclosure, fraud, and damages, just to let them know we weren't playing. Within 24 hours, I got a panicked email from the new interim HOA president, Tom. Subject: Urgent, let's talk. Hi, Evan Reed. We received your attorney's letter. First, let me say that the new board had no idea about the extent of what Eleanor was doing. We're reviewing all of her past actions, and honestly, it's worse than we thought. Please allow us 48 hours to resolve this before legal action escalates. I assure you, we want to make this right. Sincerely, Tom. Oh, now they want to make it right, I muttered. But honestly, that was exactly what I wanted. Because while Tom and the new board were scrambling to fix things, I was about to drop another bombshell. Do you remember that investigative reporter I tipped off? Yeah, she had a field day with this story. The local news station ran a full segment titled, Neighborhood HOA. Caught in foreclosure scam over 1 cent error. They even got a legal expert to explain how this could have been a criminal act if it went further. And the best part? They aired footage from the HOA recall meeting, showing Eleanor's meltdown in glorious high definition. By the time the story hit the news, people were outraged. The HOA board's new inbox was overflowing with furious emails from homeowners and calls from state regulators. It was like watching an anthill get kicked over. Less than 48 hours after the news aired, I got a formal letter from the new HOA board. Dear Evan Reed, after a full review, we have determined that your foreclosure case was entirely fraudulent and was based on an error created by the former board. Effective immediately. All charges and fines against you are dropped. The foreclosure attempt is permanently withdrawn. Your account has been marked as paid in full. The HOA is offering a formal apology. Additionally, the HOA is initiating a full audit of past fines to identify and refund any homeowners who were wrongly charged under the previous administration. Finally, in recognition of the undue stress and legal expenses this caused, the HOA is issuing you a settlement payment of $20,000. We sincerely regret the actions of the past board and appreciate your patience while we correct these issues. Sincerely, Tom, Interim HOA President. I read the letter twice. Not only was my house safe, but they were paying me $20,000 for my trouble. And the cherry on top. The full audit meant every homeowner Eleanor scammed was about to get their money back. Eleanor's entire scam was getting undone, piece by piece. I couldn't have asked for a better ending. So what happened to Eleanor? Well, after her spectacular fall from HOA power, she tried to slither away quietly. But remember how I sent all my evidence to the state HOA regulatory board? Yeah. They launched a formal investigation. Turns out, this wasn't Eleanor's first rodeo. State investigators found multiple cases of fraudulent fines and unlawful foreclosures under her leadership. Within a few months, she was banned from serving on any HOA board in the state. And as a bonus, several homeowners sued her personally for damages. I don't know how much she ended up paying, but let's just say she sold her house and moved out quietly. I went from nearly losing my home over a single penny to getting a $20,000 payout and watching Eleanor get exiled from HOA life forever. But more importantly, the neighborhood was free. With the new board in place, the ridiculous fines stopped, and homeowners actually got a say in decisions. So if you ever find yourself dealing with an out-of-control HOA, just remember, know your rights, get a good lawyer, and when necessary, take the nuclear option. Because sometimes, the only way to win a war is to make sure the other side never wants to fight you again. Thank you for listening to this story. Please share in the comments where you are from and if you enjoyed it, and see you next time.